Hello and welcome back to part two of my puppy video. And we were talking on the previous part about walking. Walking is a critical bit of having a dog. And we were talking about balls, if I correctly recall. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things about balls. So, and I learned this later on. Apparently, tennis balls are not so great for dogs because they erode the teeth, the enamel on the teeth. So they're not advisable, even though they sell them at every pet store. Instead, what I would recommend is a lacrosse ball. And the great thing about a lacrosse ball is the right size. It fits into the launcher. It's heavy as hell. It's really firm. It's actually it's rubber, but it's a solid rubber ball. It's very, very difficult to destroy, and Cola destroys, bless her, balls for a living. And so any ball that is destructible will be destroyed very quickly. I've only found so far two types of balls that Cola hasn't been able to destroy, the lacrosse ball being one of them. It's not a cheap piece of equipment. I think it's like 7 quid a pop. But if you manage not to lose it, it'll serve you for years and years and years. The other type of ball, which Cola loves to play with, is an actual basketball. My old basketball, which was a leather ball, so high quality, just not so good anymore. She continues to use it after years and years. She hasn't been able to put her teeth into it, which is really important because as soon as she does, she will eventually destroy it. Tennis balls typically last about 5 minutes, and these big blow-up balls can be gone with the first bite, the first chew, and it's done. So those two balls are quite advisable. Cola is very good with playing football with my basketball. It's great fun to watch and fun to play with as well. So once you're out on a walk and you are able to launch a ball, lacrosse ball is your weapon of choice. Speaking about walks, lead work is super important. And like I said before, Cola's not perfect. Your puppy is not going to be perfect, but lead work is one of those things where you have to actually insist on at least near perfection. So the end outcome, the end result of what I've been doing with Cola over the past 4 years is that she now walks off the lead because I can trust her that she will do what I ask her to do when I need her to. I can trust her not to jump off the sidewalk, jump in front of cars, chase squirrels, chase pigeons, whatever. She does still chase cats. So that's a bit of a concern. But in 4 years' time, she's only ever left the sidewalk and crossed the road to chase a cat once. Yes, it's a risk. And if you don't want to take that risk, then don't do that. Also, of course, walking dogs off lead on busy roads is a bad idea. So if you live on a quiet road, a cul-de-sac, or on your way to a field or to the woods, you're fine to walk them off lead eventually. I'll get to how you get to that in a minute. But certainly on a busy road where cars are passing by, have them on a lead because even if they do behave well and they don't step off of the sidewalk, the pavement, even then, they will, just by the pure presence of the dog, will potentially disturb the drivers and be a hazard. So don't do that. In terms of the lead work, then, so when I say near perfection, I mean that they must not pull. If they pull, don't walk. And there's a very simple method for doing this. It's simple but it's not easy. It's difficult because the dog will always want to go forward. They will want to run. They will want to get to where you're going. They'll be excited for the walk and they will pull, initially at least. And certainly into the first year, I would say it's likely that the dog is going to want to pull. So how do you stop that from happening? Number one, positive reinforcement, treats. You've always got some treats in your hand, near your hand. Your hand is going to smell like a treat as well. And you're always inviting the dog back to your side. If you're right-handed, to your right thigh. You want to pat your right thigh and let them know that that's where you want them to be. You don't want their nose to be further, like their head should be near your thigh, not the midriff of their body. If they start advancing forward, You can gently nudge them back, but don't drag. It's not going to help. It's just going to piss everybody off, and you're going to end up being angry at the dog, and you don't want that. Instead, turn around and say the word turn. So the dog now knows that your intention is to go the other in the other direction. And they will follow, and then they will start to pull again. You try to get them back with a treat. If that doesn't work, if they're insisting on pulling, turn again. Keep doing that until they understand that they cannot go forward, cannot go in front of you. A very good way of, and I cannot stress enough, this is going to take a while. So it's not going to happen on the first walk or even on the 10th walk. It's going to take time. It's great to practice if you have a backyard or a front yard, especially if there's a wall. Because if you go very close to a wall, the dog will almost automatically come back to you. You're not squeezing the dog against the wall, but you're really close to it. So you're walking the dog between yourself and the wall, you treat, you talk to them, and you change directions frequently so that the dog needs to pay attention to you because it doesn't know where you're about to go. If you just keep going straight, it will assume we're going that way and that's it. And then he or she will start to pull. If you continue to change directions, turn left, turn right. I used to walk her around the car, back and forth, with the car being my wall. And then there's also a little boundary wall in the garden. And I used those as confining features for her and me. And but your most important tool is the walk itself, because what motivates the dog is they want to go on the walk. So if they pull and you've done the turning exercise a couple of times and they just aren't, they're refusing to get the idea, take them back into the house. Leave them there for a couple of minutes, bring them back out, start again from scratch. This is going to be tedious for you, but you're doing it for the safety and well-being of the dog, so take it as an investment. If you have to bring the dog back more than 3 times, well, more than twice, so 3 times, terminate the walk. That's it. They will very quickly learn that the only way they get to the place they want to go for the walk is if they don't pull. So you will get progress like this if you consistently keep at it, but also if you slack off, they will try it on again. So you can't assume that once they've stopped pulling, they'll never pull again. They will try. They will keep on trying, and they will test you. And you have to let them know that, yes, the same rules continue to apply. And if they don't want to behave well, you take them back to the house. That's going to be inconvenient sometimes because, like, especially for me, when you're trying to run a household and a full-time job, blah, 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 sometimes you don't have time to play around. And you know that the dog needs 2 or 3 walks, and you're trying to get that walk in so everybody's happy. But the dog doesn't want to cooperate, and you end up not having the walk. It's frustrating for everyone, but it's part of the fun, and you have to persevere. I mean, I'm seriously one of the 2 or 3 things where you have to be the boss and you cannot let the dog lead you is the lead work. It will come back to bite you. Like when you're trying to get smaller children, for example, to take the dog on a walk and they can't physically restrain the dog because he or she is pulling so hard, it's no good at all. The treats, really important, high value treats for the lead work, and frequent treats. As I mentioned, 5 steps. You start at every 3 steps and then you go up to 5, 7, 10 steps, 12 steps, etc. So that is the walking in a nutshell, as far as I can tell. Staying is really important as well. That's one of the areas which is Cola, who is right there next to me, is her weak point. You're supposed to be able to get your dog to stay somewhere for at least a minute without them seeing you. So you turn a corner, you walk away from them, you tell them to stay, and they should be able to stay there for at least a minute. That takes time. Cola's never mastered it. The best she could do was like 45 seconds, and typically now 20, 30 seconds is all she can do. She's just going to get antsy about it and wants to check on you. Where are you? What are you doing? What's happening? If I really wanted to, I could train her to do that, but I don't particularly need her to do that. Staying for about 20, 30 seconds is usually sufficient for my purposes. And so that's the physical movement of the command to stay. and you reward if they stay there. And you start with just 5 seconds. You start, if you continue 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You build it up gradually over time with you being inside. You start walking away from them, and then you turn around, face away from them so that they don't see you face to face. And don't turn your back, don't look back. If they come after you, restart the exercise. This is the kind of stuff that you will be doing a lot of with your puppy trainers. So I don't need to go into a huge amount of detail, but eventually they'll need to be able to sit and stay without you being in sight or with you turning your back. The great thing about that is, for example, when you go on a walk, you can get them to sit down on the pavement, cross the road, leave them where they are, and then call them to you to cross the road when it's safe to do so. And the way I practice that is just on any walk when they're off the lead, call them to yourself, get them to sit and just carry on walking and have a treat ready, and then snap your fingers or call them and draw them in, give them the treat, and just keep doing that. As you walk, get them to sit down and stay where they are, and you carry on walking. This is a really good exercise. Okay, that's enough about walking. Let's talk about the pecking order for a little bit. And when I mean the pecking order, I mean the puppy or the dog needs to be the very last person in the household. So everybody takes priority over the dog. Why? Not because they're not human, they're completely human. They think so anyway. It's because they need to feel secure in the knowledge that they're being looked after and they don't need to look after anyone. The yappy, barky, nervous dog is the dog that thinks they're in charge and they're trying to run the family. So don't give them that responsibility. They don't deserve it. They don't need it, and you don't want them to either. So for that reason, everything we do, we need to let them know that they're the last person in the pecking order. So, for example, at the table, when you eat, feed them last. Don't feed them first. If you have to feed them first, because sometimes that happens, dinner's not ready, they're hungry. It's just in the process of things that you're going to feed them before the families had dinner, for example. In that case, grab a piece of food, show it to them that you're eating this food. They will understand that you're now eating and they're next. They're not first, never first. And you can probably deviate from this from time to time. It's never going to hurt anybody. But as a general rule, you really need to pay attention that they don't come first. The same thing applies and entering and exiting. So doors, gates, anything. They'll want to go forward, but they need to learn that you are going to step through any gate or door first and then allow them to follow you. And this is a great exercise. You can do it outdoors where you're like for example, on a trail with cow gates. It's a perfect place where you get them to sit down, you open the gate, you walk through, and then they come through. Um, and so in every situation, you need to let them know that you're the boss. And it's not because you want to be bossy, but because you don't want them to be bossy, which manifests itself in unpleasant behaviors. Um, Dominance. Like for example, with jumping and humping, that's another unpleasant dominant behavior you don't want. So you must not encourage it, especially now when you're early on with the puppy. You must encourage them not to do that. If they do it, you need to stop the behavior and you need to reward when they don't do it. So very simple stuff. 4 paws on the ground. That's the rules. If you want to play with me, you've got to have 4 paws on the ground. You can't be jumping up on me. You can't be humping my leg, however funny that might feel initially. Once you have a 35-kilo dog, big beast, you're not going to be wanting them to jump on you, jump on little children on the street, or jump on your children, or hump legs of people around them. So really root that behavior out right from the start early on. 4 feet on the ground. And of course, as I said, start as you mean to go on. Any behavior you don't want later, you don't want now either. It's the same thing with the training pads, which is why I wouldn't put training pads inside the house because you don't want them to go pee-poo in the house at all. Okay, so let's talk about food. And I've learned something interesting recently from a vet in terms of the kinds of foods and mixing foods. So Cola has historically, we try to, she's not food oriented. So unless the food is interesting, properly interesting for her, she might as well not eat it. Um, it's so she's on raw food now, but mixed in with kibble. And the reason why we mix the two is a couple of reasons. Number one, the kibble happens to be a carbon neutral food. It's called Yora Pet Foods, Yora, Yora Pet Foods. You can find them online, and they produce an insect-based food which is hypoallergenic, good for the environment, good for the dog, everything great, except Cola, bless her, she doesn't particularly like it. So she wouldn't eat it by itself. We've tried the dry food as well as the wet food version. They have both, and she didn't like either one of them really. However, she does like raw food. So we buy these blocks of 1 pound in weight, each of these blocks. Um, we buy them from Durham Animal Feeds, daffoods.co.uk, something like that. We buy them in bulk, maybe a month's worth of supplies, which sit in our freezer. They need to be frozen. They come frozen, and you need to keep them frozen. And so we mix the two together, which means that Cola will have some of the kibble, but will also eat the raw food. And the reason why we mixed it, number one, because we want her to eat the kibble primarily, but number two, because the raw food in itself produces super rock hard poos. So hard that she found it difficult to pass the poos. And so we found that when we mix the two together, it becomes like the perfect consistency. You want your dog to produce a poo which is pleasant to pass, but also easy to pick up. You don't want it to be too runny. You don't want it to be too firm. And that mixing has produced us the right kind of result. However, what I've recently learned is that these two types of foods get digested at different speeds, which might give Cola or your dog, um, I don't know if it gives you tummy ache, but it certainly gives you wind. So if you're not prepared for the wind, you've got to figure something else out for yourself. It works for us. It's not so terribly bad. Um, and it certainly does make sense. And I really like the kinds of poos that she produces on an average day. It's just, it makes my life easy. While we're on the poos, let's talk a little bit about picking up poos and what to pick it up with. So my general rule is I pick up poos, and wherever people, especially children or other dogs might run, I will pick it up. If it's deep in a shrub, which I can't get to, I will not try and dig in there. However, if it's within, I don't know, 5 meters of a footpath, I will definitely go and get it, even if it's in the long grass or it's in the it's in among the trees. So if you find it, pick it up. If you don't find it, I find that if you look at it from different angles, you will eventually find it. You can find it based on smell. You can also find it based on vapor. If it's cold out there, you can see it sort of uh, coming up and creating a little fog patch there. Um, if you think all of this stuff sounds disgusting, you will actually get used to it. It's not a big deal. So yeah, so picking up poos and yeah, poo bags. So I found that, and I'm, as some of you might be aware, quite big on environmentalist stuff. So I always prefer the recyclable and the recycled materials for anything. I don't like plastic if we can avoid it. However, for these biodegradable poo bags, I will say they do actually biodegrade. So if you keep them long enough, they'll start falling apart in your hands, and they will, then you're going to get poo on your hands, which I wouldn't want. Um, so instead, I use, and I would recommend, a stronger recycled plastic poo bag. The poo needs to go in terminal rubbish. It does not get recycled, so the bag doesn't get recycled either. And so having a biodegradable poo bag doesn't really make all that much difference because you're not going to put it in in your compost. You cannot put dog poo in the compost, so don't. It contains compounds that are apparently toxic for years to come, so you shouldn't be using it in your garden as compost, or especially not with foodstuffs. So it goes in the bin in a recycled plastic poo bag pouch. Always keep a few with you, a roll. And Cola typically produces 2, but sometimes up to 4 poos in one walk. So you'll have to use several. My calculations, if they're correct, tell me that 1 poo bag costs about 4p. So that's your cost of living. If you happen to run out, I highly recommend talking to other dog walkers. They will be very happy to lend you one and not want it back. So that's about poos and poo bags and food types. Let's see, what else do I have? I'm going to stop the recording to give myself a little time to think. Yes, I was continuing to talk about the foodstuffs. So we've talked about how many times we feed, 3 times, twice, once. We need to talk about portion sizes. So with Cola and her puppies becoming somewhere between 30 and 40 kg, you're looking at one of these pouches of raw food mixed in with some kibble. That's your daily dose. If they're super active, bring it up to 1.5, but you feed based on looks. So you monitor the midriff of the dog. If they start to go out, if it starts to look like they're losing visibility of their ribs, then you gently, maybe about 10%, reduce the dose. Of course, you need to factor in the treats that you provide as well. So if you're treating like crazy because you're teaching a behavior, then you reduce the daily dose just a little bit accordingly. Harmful foods. So we always get told no chocolate, no grapes, no raisins, no onions, no garlic. And sure, do all of those things. Grapes and raisins are reasonably easy. Onions, especially if you're going to be onions and garlic, if you're feeding your dog any of the leftovers of the food that you guys are eating, and the dog will always be super interested in the food you eat. Oftentimes when Cola has no appetite, the only way we can get her to eat her food is to lace it with some leftovers of our food so that she can smell our food smell in her food bowl. And in those instances, sometimes garlic or some traces of onions can make it into her food in a cooked form. I don't think we should worry about that too much if it's a small amount, and especially if it's cooked. It never seems to have caused her any problems whatsoever. So, don't sweat the small stuff. It's going to be fine. She has had one anaphylactic reaction very early on in her childhood to almost certainly a tin of salmon. So it was tinned salmon. She had a puffy face and she looked pretty bad. We took her to puppy A&E. They gave her antihistamines and steroids, and it calmed down. We then avoided anything to do with fish for quite some time with her, but she's absolutely fine with fish now, and including salmon. We didn't feed her tins of salmon ever again, just in case, who knows. But I think it was a one-off with her. But look, if you can see a puffy face and you can see it in the eyes, particularly, then definitely it's time to go to puppy A&E. And you need to know where that is, which is not typically your usual vet. It will be a separate clinic doing the A&E work during the nights and evenings. So then, vets. Now that we're on the subject of vets, I'm sure you've got yourself a vet. Get yourself a puppy plan. You will thank yourself later because it usually includes at least 1 or sometimes 2 free consultations where you bring the dog in. You don't have to pay. It includes the worming, the fleeing, vaccinations, and it just gives you peace of mind, and it spreads the cost across a year as well. So I would definitely recommend that. I don't know that there's a great deal of difference between various vets. We take her to Vets for Pets, which is a franchise. People there are lovely. They always, we're on their system. They know everything about us, and that's been the case for years and years. It works fine. Obviously, they will give you a schedule for worming and fleeing and vaccination, which you kind of have to follow. They'll also give you the medications to provide to the dog on occasion every 3 months or so. Dogs don't particularly like these medications. They don't taste so great, so you put them in a piece of cheese when you give them the pill, and it typically goes down. So there isn't really much to worry about there. You just keep having to remember to give it. Annual visits, even if nothing is going wrong, because you're going to get the vaccinations. So you've got to have an annual visit. If you're ever worried, give them a call. And typically the vet will say, yeah, not a cause for concern, or yes, bring them in, we'll have a look. Dehydration is one, especially with puppies. If you pinch the puppy's skin and you let it go and it doesn't bounce back within the first second or so, they might be dehydrated. If you see that their eyes are receded somewhat, they might be dehydrated. That is really important to look out for, especially if they have developed diarrhea for any reason. There is a high likelihood of dehydration. So you've got to pay attention to that because they can deteriorate pretty quickly. Okay, we've talked about training, basic sit, stay, come. I mean, this is stuff you're going to be looking at in the puppy training anyway. Potty training, socialization. I would say as much social life as possible. Introduce them to various different people. We've talked about noises, people, and other dogs. Cola is typically great around all people, never bitten or threatened any person, is good with other dogs. However, she has had some negative experiences with a couple of dogs in her early childhood, and she takes issue with them ever since. So, I don't think it's avoidable. Sometimes dogs just don't get along, people don't get along, and that's fine. If that's the case, what I have done is I know the pattern of how that other dog is being walked, and I don't walk Cola at that time in that place so that they don't get to meet. And that worked out fine. It's an avoidant behavior, and I don't want to have to confront that dog, and I don't want to have to confront the owner, who happens to be a less pleasant chap. And so trying to talk sense into him is a waste of my time. Instead, I'm behaving in this avoidant behavior, which I think is okay. Stimulation. So the dogs do get bored, and so you want them to be stimulated. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean, like we've said, don't just throw a whole bunch of toys in there and expect them to entertain themselves. You do actually have to work on entertaining the dog. Entertaining not just in a way of playing with them, but also teaching tricks and practicing tricks. They like that. That's mental stimulation. So, even if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, you just spend some time, bring out the treats, practice the tricks that you already know, teach them a new one. Just pay attention to that mental stimulation. They also like slouching about. So, dogs sleep 18 plus hours a day. They don't really need to be up and running all the time. As long as they get their nice 1.5 to 2 hours of running about, walking about, sniffing about. Sniffing is really important, as you well know. A minor break, we're back, and I'd like to talk about last couple of things. One of them is hygiene. So bathing, grooming, toenails, teeth. So first of all, with Cola and her puppies, they are all going to be relatively short coated, with the possible exception of Mr. Orange, also known as Chunk. He has a slightly longer coat, but still I would consider that a short coat. So I don't think you will need a lot of grooming. We've never taken Cola to a grooming salon for a haircut as such. It's not needed. They do shed once or twice a year, and then you have to use a very strong, firm brush to brush the excess hair out. They like that. They enjoy that. They're going to stand there and allow you to do that. So do it. You can also shower them. If you do that, a lot of the excess hair comes out anyway. So that works as well. In terms of after walks, we normally wipe their feet, wipe Cola's feet with a towel, and then we let them in. If it's muddy, it has to be rinsed down. Now, we have installed ourselves a warm and cold water tap with a shower outside of the house, just next to our side door. So we can actually give her a warm shower, complete shower, before she comes in the house, if it's needed, even during the winter time when I wouldn't, for example, wash her with cold water. And in the winter, especially when it's muddy, it's really necessary to do. And this we have noticed since we've installed this tap is it's significantly reduced both the mess and the excess hair inside the house. We don't let her up on the first floor, but even on the ground floor. The ground floor is far, far cleaner since we've been using this. And you don't need to use any dog shampoo or anything else. Just shower them down. I mean, since the 4 years that we've had Cola, I think we might have used dog shampoo once a year, maybe. Um, and there is a downside to the dog shampoo as well, because of course the dog smells it too, and they don't want to smell like that. They want to smell like dog. In fact, they want to smell like fox, so camouflage. So we've noticed that after the shampooing down, we're so happy. Oh, she smells so nice, so clean. And the first thing she does is goes out into the next walk and rolls in whatever shit she can find. So we come back home smelling like shit, whether that's horse shit, dog shit, or fox shit, who knows. But she needs to get rid of that clean smell that we like. So you end up rinsing them down again, and then she ends up smelling like dog. And so you kind of give up on that idea of the fresh clothing smelling dog. You're never going to get that, and you shouldn't. They don't like it. Um, but the shower is definitely a recommended option, and she likes a warm shower. She'll let you give her a full shower, and then she'll shake herself down, and then you wipe her down, and then in she comes. So that's grooming. Nail trimming. So if you run the dog as you should normally, with an hour and a half to 2 hours of walking every day, you will not need to trim their nails. The only reason why you need to trim their nails, especially in the early years, is if they're sedentary. So later on, and we haven't got that far with Cola, who's only 4.5 years old, they will slow down, they will run less, they will walk less or just walk slower, and they will wear their nails down less. And then it might come to having to trim the nails. For the little puppies, we have already trimmed their nails twice, and we might need to trim it again. You might need to trim it early on because they're quite sharp. They will get, as soon as they start having proper walks, that will recede and it will become more blunt. In terms of the teeth, so dogs need to chew, not just because they have a chewing reflex, but also to clean their teeth. So some people don't advise sticks, and I get it. It can get stuck in a dog's mouth, and it does, and it has done once for Cola. It's unpleasant for her, but there's sticks everywhere. And so chew toys, of course, in the house, and then you're out and about, they'll probably chew on sticks. That's fine. We also bought Cola a toothbrush, and we started using it, and there's like a round little thing that goes between her teeth. It's a clever little thing. Cola didn't particularly like it, didn't particularly hate it. She was fine with it, but we kind of stopped doing it. We get these the chewable, edible chews that are supposed to clean her teeth. When you buy those, just make sure that they are not ones with a huge amount of sugar in them. They can be extremely high sugar content. So buy like a natural product. And that is that. You will have potentially accidents where the dog steps into something, for example, a nail or something sharp, and will have a wound on their feet. That is definitely something that you want to pay close attention to. They will be limping. Shoes, dog shoes are available. They're really clever. They're really useful because they protect the foot and the wound so that it can heal properly. If you're at all worried, take them to the vet. They'll likely not do anything. They're not going to stitch it up. they're going to suggest that you get one of these shoes until it heals. It can take a couple of weeks to heal, so it can be an unpleasant experience. Also, the dog doesn't like the shoes on, so you need to make sure that they keep it on. They'll chew it off. You might have to buy a couple, but they'll get used to it, and that's fine. If it's a body injury, you know, these cones that they have, there are better solutions than that. So compression on the body, specifically on the body part where the wound is a better solution. It distresses the dog less. If you have a girl dog and she will be in season, you can get her little panties that protect your carpets from the drippage of small droplets of blood. If you do that, be prepared for the fact that they will chew it off. So they will keep it on as long as you're in sight, and as soon as you're out of sight, they'll sit down and chew, chew, and chew until they get rid of it. They don't like it. I mean, they can wear it, but it's a temporary measure and probably won't work overnight. So if you're going to have a dog who's in season and is dripping blood, then certainly when they're out of your sight, they either need to be out in the garden or in their crates. We have hardwood flooring on the whole of the ground floor, which is really advisable if you have a female dog, because you're going to end up with droplets of blood in your carpet, almost certainly. Okay, I'm going to review my little notes and come back to you in a sec. Oh, yes, the last thing I wanted to mention was children, because children have their own ideas of how they want to be with the dog. And we have to not just train the dog, but also train the children. One of the most important things that can happen is the children want to overwhelmingly just play with the dog, and the dog might not want that. You'd think, well, dog is a man's best friend, and so the dog should always be available for playing, but that's not the case. They're their own person as well, and sometimes they just don't want to. If you grab them, if you hug them, they might lick you. Licking doesn't mean that they're enjoying themselves. It might mean an anxiety that they're trying to appease the person that is holding them. We need to let them go and see what they want to do. If they want to retire into their crate, let's not go into the crate. So children are discouraged from invading the private zone of the dog. So if the dog wants to be in the crate, let's just leave them alone. They want to sleep or they want to be not dealing with humans at that time. Also, children can be very easily inconsistent with the dog, treat them when they shouldn't, encourage behaviors they shouldn't, like the jumping up, for example, or treat from the table. Never, ever, not one single time do you give dogs food from the table, unless you want them to continue carry on begging for it until the end of time. So even if your child wants to give a treat to the dog, they need to do it at the correct time for the right reasons and in the right space as well. If there's leftover food on the table that you intend to give to the dog, do not give it to them at the table. Remove it from the table, stick it in their bowl, put it in their place, and then give it to them. Oh, on that subject of controlling the food and controlling everything, we've talked about how you can teach a dog to not take away the treat. You remember we talked about it quite early on in the beginning. You have a treat in one hand and you're not giving them the other treat. So the same thing applies to the food. They must not touch food until you allow them to. And whatever route, there's so many ways in which a routine can be developed. You develop your own. Ours is we get them to sit down, wait, and then we allow them to have the food. And confessions time, we probably overdid this initially because we had a problem then of she didn't want to pick up the food even when we allowed it. And we had to train her out of that habit. And she still sometimes falls into that. She waits and waits and waits. We probably overtrained it. And so get them to sit down, wait a little bit, and then show the food to them and let them have the food. With a command word. For us, it's yours. But you can use any other command word as you see fit. However, that tells them that they cannot eat food. For example, out on the street, they cannot accept food from other people unless you let them have it. And please, when you go on walks, if you meet other dogs and dog owners with treats, always ask whether you can give a treat to another dog, and always encourage others to ask from you. So at that point, you want your dog to perform something. Sit down, lie down, do something for the treat. Don't just treat a dog by a stranger, because what that teaches your dog is anybody can give me food and I am allowed to accept that. We don't want that. We don't want anybody handing food to the dog. We don't know who they are. And so the same thing applies to the children. Once you've been trained by the puppy trainer how you behave with the dog, you then train your children how they need to behave with the dog as well. I wish you good luck. And if you would like to contact me at any time for advice, please feel free to do so. If I can give you advice, I will. And if I can't, I will also tell you that I cannot and where you should go for that piece of advice. Good luck.